Welcome to Your Brand Amplified, the podcast where we interview marketers, publicists, and brands to learn their stories, what makes them tick, and tips and tricks that make a difference. I am super thrilled today to have Colombian-American producer and director Deborah Correa with us today. Deborah, thank you for being on Your Brand Amplified.
Thank you for this opportunity, Annika. It's exciting.
Yeah. I don't interview people in entertainment very often on the show, but what I love is everything that you bring and all of your background that makes you the essence of who you are and how you take that into filmmaking. So let's start at the very beginning, as we shall say. Colombian-American, you live in the United States, but you didn't start out here. Will you talk about your experience growing up?
Yeah, I was raised and born in Woodland, California, in Northern California. And my father, he was born in Medellin, but he's from Bogota, Colombia. And my mother and him met and fell in love. She is a native Californian. And he moved to the States to get married, for them to get married. And then they had 5 kids, and I was right in the middle. So we ended up moving to Colombia for a few years. And I feel like that was a big crossroads in my life because it was while I was still a kid and becoming a teenager, and it was like at the height of the cartel drug wars in Colombia. So we got to see firsthand what that was like, and being an American in Colombia, you feel like a fish out of water because you don't feel like you fit in culturally, but I'm half Colombian. So it's like, when you're navigating that as a kid, you're trying to understand like, okay, I understand that my father's from here and my family lives here and I spent time here. But, it's just navigating that. And then what I found actually harder was coming back to the States after living there for a few years, because your perspective changes so much from that exposure and your priorities are realigned or they become in a different kind of alignment. And so I came back to the States. It was like, whoa, it was a reverse culture shock. And I found that to be really hard to navigate too. But that experience in Colombia is what fed into my desire to become a filmmaker. We spent a lot of time reading books, and my sister and I are both literature majors as well in college. So it was the power of storytelling and the power of exposure for things that you haven't been exposed to before and access to our shared humanity within storytelling that really triggered this like passion and desire to be a filmmaker and understanding the power of story within film. So it was like directly related to wanting to become a filmmaker and honoring that part of my father's culture and my culture and the beauty of what that blend is. So I find all of that very like interesting and beautiful. So that was kind of where I think the inspiration for becoming a filmmaker came from, actually. Yeah.
I love that you were able to turn, all of these experiences into figuring out who you are and what your passion is and how you're here to serve the world. And my mom is from Thailand, and we're from Thai and Laos on that side. She came here for college. So the immigrant story, I love hearing people's immigrant stories, whether you are the first one to come to the United States or whether it is your parents or grandparents, because those really do affect who we become, right? That otherness that we feel, because I'm sure a lot of people look at you, they probably don't even realize that you're half Colombian. Like, people think I'm always something other than Thai. So we get otherized in different ways, or we don't get recognized for that piece of us that still helps us become fully who we are.
Right. That's well said. Yeah.
And that is really the beauty of storytelling and helping share finding the commonalities in shared experience.
Yeah.
Even if it's somebody has a completely different experience than you.
Yes.
So, yeah.
100%. Yeah. I very much resonate with what you just said. And knowing who you are, who you are and being centered in that and understanding that and staying grounded is the most important part, because it's almost like how you see yourself gets reflected back at you from the world too. And so having that strength of your identity, no matter what it is, it starts within you and it's projected out. And I feel like that has been part of my journey too, is just acknowledging that part of it and the power that I have internally to express who I am and to let that be like how I communicate to the world.
Yeah, definitely. So growing up, did you make little film projects? Did you get some of your siblings to act things out?
That's a good question. It's so funny. It's like, I am also a producer. So when we were younger, I would like organize these events. There's 5 of us. So we would all put on a play like the Nutcracker. Like, so we were all different characters in the Nutcracker, and we would invite all of our neighborhood and family to come see it. I also did something like Circus of the World. So each sibling represented a different country, and how they would do a performance of that. And so, we would sell tickets, and I would have little like programs and brochures and a little event. I thought that was really funny. And that was like prior to moving to Colombia. But I think it was kind of like in me to generate an audience and to tell a story through art somehow.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So you talked about moving back, kind of reverse culture shock. It's so interesting when people do come, when you go from one country to another and you get used to a certain way of being, a certain way of expressing yourself, and a certain way of moving about the world. And then you get thrust back into the culture here, which I think is much more fast-paced, rat racy, not as much probably emphasis on family and taking time to do things and really enjoy each other's perspectives and stories. So is that part of what you felt when you moved back, or were there other things?
I just remember being like, oh my gosh, the sidewalks are so neat. Like,
oh, wow.
I just remember being like, we were back in our grandparents' neighborhood in Woodland, and it was like the grass and the sidewalks and the curves just so neat and it's perfect and clean. And it just kind of felt a little bit off to me, because it was like, what is this like perfect little world that we live in here, where it's like kind of like a facade of perfection. Right. And I went to high school. It was like I was getting into high school. And it felt so wrong, because the emphasis was all about what group you were in, what you looked like, these like very superficial qualifiers of being a person, that I was like, it just became a shock to me, because, you watch these like TV shows when you're younger and you're like excited about high school because you think it's going to be this like fun adventure. And that's just not what I experienced at all.
Yeah. That is not typical.
I was like in the art crowd. I also played the clarinet and band. I played the violin and orchestra. And of course, there was like all the nerds or whatever. But I loved that part of it. So it was like a funny mix of what your expectations are coming back and then what actually happens to you. And a lot of it, I ended up just not really loving high school. Mm-hmm. After that. But I will never forget that reaction of, you're living in a place where it was like car bombs were normal. It was always scary to kind of go out, because first of all, it's not just how you look. It's like people could tell you're American there based on like how you walk, how you dress. It's not just like a physical thing. That changes everything. Like, you put things very, very quickly into priorities. And when you're young doing that, it changes you as a person. You kind of grow up too fast.
Oh, yeah.
So coming back to high school is like, wow, this is really immature. Like, what is this? But from there, like getting into college, I loved college. So it was like that transition to going to film school was huge for me, and it changed a lot. And I traveled abroad, and I went to Madrid, and I went to the Netherlands, and like being able to travel more. And that was a huge part of my education too.
Interesting. This was the perfect segue, because I was going to ask you about the experience of going away to university and getting into the study of film in a more formal way.
Yeah, I was so excited, because like when I was younger, I did like, my grandfather had documented his World War II experience. He did China, Burma, India, and he was in the medical corps. So I have like all his black and white photographs from that time, and he archived on the back of them what happened, where he was, and the date and everything. And my grandfather was a big influence in my life. He's like my mentor, and he was very supportive of me pursuing film and the storytelling aspect of that. So I just like, through books and photographs, we had a little movie camera, but I wasn't even like experimenting with that yet. We watched a lot of home movies when we were growing up, but it was more like learning the visual storytelling aspect of film in film school that was the best for me, because it's like I had a strong sense of story. Mm-hmm. And understanding story through literature. And I think with film school, it helped me to just like to interpret that visually. Like how, they say a picture is like about worth 1,000 words. Like, you have moving picture, like how much is being communicated in each frame. And so it was going through that process, I found it so fun, and I loved it very much. I studied visual media arts at Emerson College. And to me, it was just kind of opening the doors of what you can do with film. And it was narrative, like unscripted and documentary that I was studying. I was studying both.
Wow.
And yeah, it was just like a very rich time in my life, and I loved it.
Mm-hmm. Then what did you do next? Did you go to graduate school? Did you get right into your field of choice? Did you find your dream job?
I mean, I ended up doing a thesis project at Emerson about a displaced village during the narco wars who were returning to their village with the government's help.
Yeah.
And I had been to Colombia in years. And so it was a return for me as well. And my dad came up with us on that trip. And it was like, another eye-opening experience. But we were like on donkeys, trudging through the wet jungle, getting back to this village there was a massacre that had taken place. And they were returning home, and it was a very emotional, powerful experience. And that short documentary, it showed me how much I love working in film, but it's like I said, the shared humanity. It's like how we empathize with each other and have compassion for each other in these experiences, and then being able to communicate that visually and tell that story. So that short doc, I did open doors at PBS, and I started working for Austin Hoyt, who's an independent filmmaker, independent producer, director of a lot of American experience documentaries. And so I started working in documentary with him first for a few years. And I still had this appetite for narrative filmmaking too. So I was like, I just feel the urge to go to LA. And so I made the move from Boston to come to LA. And I got a development job at this little Disney startup for digital. It's like when the digital space was starting to open up, like with the It was fun because it was creative development for 3 different executives, and I loved it. But it was very soon after I got into the AFI directing workshop for women, and that was just a huge dream come true because it's a very hard program to get into. It's a very competitive, and I felt very much that it was going to take me to the next level, career-wise. And it was, again, another amazing learning experience about the filmmaking process, and then also navigating how to do it in the real world in real time, not just film school, but it was actually they were acting as if they were a studio. So that was another really great opportunity, and experience was really challenging, but all these expectations I had about, I'm going to end up going here or doing this, it's going to open all these doors. That never happened.
Really? Okay. That's not what I was expecting you to say.
Yeah, it was it was a really hard time too. It was the economy was going through hard things. I was having a really hard time finding a job and just temping. And so I ended up going back to Boston and moving to New York with my husband and, trying out advertising and seeing what that was like. And I was just so unhappy. I was so unhappy. I didn't feel like I was on my trajectory anymore. It felt like I was being pulled in the wrong direction. And a friend was making a short film in LA. He's like, just help me finish it. And so I came back and did that. And it got me back into film. And I started working on a show for the History Channel. And that just turned into a season 2 and then another film project. And so things started to blossom when I came back after this, I don't even know what I would call it. It was just it was a dark night of the soul couple years. Things are really hard. So it was in my mind, I was I have to try other things because this obviously isn't working. This is more like a hobby. I can't actually sustain myself with this. And so that hard reality made me very sad. I need to find a way to break through. And I had committed to myself, no matter what happens in my life, I have to learn to be happy now under this sky, standing on this ground in this moment, in this present moment. I have to learn to be happy with who I am and that I'm alive and that there's a lot of amazing things happening around me and for me. And it's once that shifted where it was this expectation and it has to be like this. If I don't direct my feature film by the time I'm 30, then I'm a failure. I can't do, all of that very harsh language that we do with ourselves internally. And I think a lot of women do that in our culture where it's we're really hard on ourselves. We have to have a baby. If we want to do this, we have to be directing this. We have to, all of this stuff, we compete with ourselves. Mm-hmm. It's very oppressive and it's not productive. And it's I've learned to shed those layers of self-judgment and criticism to just let my life happen and be grateful for what is happening and then build on to the next thing. And so that's what my experience has been is trusting that next thing is going to happen and not being in so much harsh resistance with myself because I'm not where I think I'm supposed to be.
You just hit the nail on the head for so many people who are going through whatever entrepreneurship journey, small business journey, looking to make a shift or a pivot because they realize that what they're doing isn't what they're passionate about and what they really want to pursue. I love that you thought you had to go down this path. You took some time off, went into another industry, which can be very lucrative. A lot of people do. You can win awards directing commercials and working in advertising, but you also realize this is short form video. This is doing this and this is what I'm assuming, but it's not where your passion was. And when we do have that freedom to feel like we can just let go, whether it's let go and let God or, whatever vernacular you use, whatever you believe in, that is when magic starts to happen. I've experienced that in my own life too. Even, you're right. We beat ourselves up all the time and think we have to hit these metrics that are superficial metrics. So I love that you took the time out to recenter and reground yourself, realize like my path will happen. And then all of a sudden, all these doors opened up for you. And your husband at that time was moved back. He was okay moving back. And
well, that's like a whole other long saga. But and I could get into that too. But it was that one door that opened with a friend, right? It was a friend from AFI. And that one door opened. And that's what led to like all these other opportunities that ended up coming in. And I still struggle with this. I still struggle with the self-judgment and self-doubt and the criticism and this like toxic comparison game. Like it's something that I've learned to just like choose to not go down that thought process because it becomes very like paralyzing instead of energizing, it's this moment of understanding like there's only a certain amount within your control and being responsible for that and holding yourself accountable to what you can control and then letting the rest go and understanding that there is an order and a flow to things that you cannot figure out, no matter how much you try to strategize. And, I'm all about networking, but it's like, no matter how hard you try to network or strategize or do this, or apply to this, apply to that, it might not work out the way you think.
Mm-hmm. But to the point of networking, keeping in touch with friends and colleagues who had been through this experience with you helped them think about you because it just took one opportunity to get your foot in the door.
It's those authentic relationships, those authentic friendships. It's not like, you're trying to network with somebody to see what you can get or, okay, that's fair up to a point where there's like a give and take and reciprocation. That's like, I get that. But it's like these deeper, authentic friendships that were just the friendships for being the friendship, that more of the opportunity came out of. And that's been my experience. Like I hear a lot of people that have had different experiences with networking, but it's also like your temperament, like who are you as a person, your personality, and it's okay to be who you are. If you're more introverted or shy, or it's okay for that part of yourself to be realized too. Like you don't need to change who you are to be successful. But I don't think that. I think it's more like you said, it's like a moment of surrender and a deep valuing of yourself and knowing that your success comes from inside of you. It's not from like outside of you. It's not someone who's going to give you like that big giant break. Yeah, it might manifest in that way, but it's actually coming from inside of you and knowing that you're ready and that you can do it.
Yeah. And that power of connection. I've also found the more authentic connections. That's whether I do what I did when I was living in a different city, right? I might have the slightly different career, slightly different job, but people will remember me from those interactions and those connections that we still have.
Yeah.
Then think of me. And I think that's a really beautiful thing when it's not about trying to get something from each other. It's about forming authentic communication, authentic relationships, keeping in touch, supporting each other on your journeys. So I love that you're saying all these things because I think this is something that people forget. A lot of times we get stuck in this, okay, how am I going to sell myself for my next job, my next client, my next customer, whatever industry you're in, what you're saying goes through all of them. Just doesn't apply to film. But I do want to talk about your journey in film because you have produced quite a bit and you've had this want, right? This driving desire to then now move into directing. And you finally have had that opportunity recently. So what was that shift like when you moved from producing to directing and the kinds of projects that you've been working on?
That is a really good question. I just want to say that initially when I was pursuing filmmaking, my dream was directing. My dream has always been directing. That's been my childhood dream. It's been my goal. And it's almost like producing came as a means to that in a way, but it was also staying open to ways of being able to pay the bills and opportunities and understanding okay, I'm a good producer. I know how to multitask. I know how to get this stuff done. I know how to work with people and talk to people. So there's a two-faceted approach to that. And even with this film that I directed, I was one of the producers as well. And so it's part of just, using a skill set to make stuff happen. That's what I feel like. And I love producing too. I think it gives you this inspiration to keep moving forward because you're creating something. And I think in that way, it's okay, you can parallel that with directing because directing is creating something. To me, it's when I started to physically prep and direct The War Between, which is the feature film that I just directed, I had to kind of take my producer hat off. A lot of it because it was diving really deep in with my cinematographer, Evan Jake Cohen, who I met him at Emerson in like my first film class. And I was like, oh my God, his films are so amazing. And who is this person? And so he's shot all my projects, throughout all these years. And it was really diving in with him on the creative approach to the logistics of how we're going to shoot it. And the different angles, storyboarding, photo boarding, shot listing, and really having like this deep, in-depth approach. And we didn't have a lot of prep time. There was like, there's a period of time where you're just like not sleeping that much and you're just getting all the work done and prepping as much as you can. And then, having the conversations with the actors and finding out where they're getting their inspiration for the character and, how you marry your approach to how you want to direct the scene and how they want to play the character and being like, wow, this is a beautiful merging of collaboration and creativity, what they brought to it. And I think directing, like, I guess like going back to like the root of your question is like, how is directing different from producing, right?
Yeah, how's it different? Like, what were the unexpected things that you found?
The directing's a lot more fun than producing.
Okay.
Producing, I feel like it's like you get that hit from getting your to-do list done. And there's a certain kind of completion and being able to like just get stuff done, right? With directing, it's almost like you're creating a whole other entire world that's never been seen before. And you get to do that with your crew and you get to do that with your cast. And it's really magical. It's exhausting, but exhilarating at the same time. We shot on location entirely on location in Arizona. It was like we were 80% of the time outside in the desert. It was like hardcore. It was trial by fire, but it was so exciting and pre-visualizing and visually interpreting the story from the page. I mean, there's just something about that it's just so fun and it's so magical. I don't know how else to explain. It's a lot of hard work, but that's how it's different from producing. Like you're literally taking the script and you're visually breaking it down. Where with producing, you're like, okay, how are we going to get this logistics of all this to come together? How do we get the crew? How do we get the budget? How do we like figure out how to shoot this? Who gets the permit? Like all of that logistical stuff. It's so different.
Operations versus creative strategist almost.
Yeah, and you're kind of also like, that's right. It's my first feature. I've done like 3 shorts and then 2 short doc. I have to like remember everything, but this is my first feature. And so I was learning how I process the information so that I could be efficient when I'm doing the scene. And there's like a lot of technical stuff I can get into about how to shoot the scene, how to cover the scene, and how to work quickly. I don't know if we want to go with that granular, but I think that's a whole, technical side of directing that as a producer, you don't really experience.
Yeah.
Are you ready to take your brand to new heights? Join the Brand Amplifier for Entrepreneurs program. Learn how to build, elevate, and amplify your brand with a comprehensive 10-module course. Learn more about it and other ways to implement our strategies at fullcapacitymarketing.com. Click on EFCM Learning Hub for more information. Can't wait to help you amplify your brand.
I'd love to talk about the length of the process because I know typically when, from my world, obviously, I'm in a totally different world than you in terms of I'm marketing, PR, branding, work with people like yourself, but it's a different type of creativity and process. So I'd love to hear, like, how long does the process take? Like you said, you didn't have a lot of time. Is that typical? You didn't have a lot of turnaround time to get everything ready to go?
I think when you're doing a low budget, super indie film, that's typical. Yeah. I think no time is typical. Never having enough time is typical. And learning, like you just quickly learn how to prioritize. And if something is not working out, or say there's a delay, like one day we needed the water truck to shoot the scene first. We had a very tight schedule and it was very specific based on the script. And so when one of the days things get flipped or you have to move something, it can push your days. So it was constantly working with our first AD, who's a Rusty Case, who is amazing. Like there's some kind of like genius scientist to be able to figure out these schedules with the shoot because you're shooting out of order. Sometimes you're shooting backward. So we had like the water truck didn't get there and we had to push everything. And so I was like, okay, how do we make this work? And you just have to figure it out. Sometimes you'll have an issue with the scene just not working. And so you'll have to make that executive decision. Okay, we'll shoot this for coverage. If it doesn't work, we're going to throw it out. So it's kind of being able to take a step back, see the bigger picture of what you can accomplish and get done and what needs to get done for the film to get made, and then letting go of certain expectations of like, oh my God, but I love this scene, or I love this line, or I love this moment, and like it's not working. Okay, just move on. You got to move on. And they say, like, editors love to say it, kill your babies, because in post it's a whole other thing. But yeah, sometimes you have to like cut the stuff that you think is like your favorite stuff, but you realize it's not working for the cohesion of the whole film, so you have to let it go.
Yeah, I think that is a common issue, knowing when to stop or knowing what to take out to make sure that you're sharing the essence, right, of what you're trying to share. And hopefully you get to keep as many of those moments in as you can, but not always. It's just part of the creative process. And I think that also it applies throughout any entrepreneurship journey is, when do you have to course correct? When do you have to pivot? When do you have to go out of order? And when do you have to be patient? Because I know that you are in editing right now and you have to do all these things that are really technical that probably a lot of people in the audience won't understand. And I know like a few of the words, but not all of them certainly. But like color locking and, you know, all the other things that have to go into post-production. And then it's kind of like you spent all this creative energy and time focused on this project. Now it's in post, and then you still have to get it to market. So I'm sure that it can be really hard to like live in the patience that you must have to be a director and a producer and be in the film industry, and let the process, as you said, just let the process play itself out.
Yeah, because I mean, you have pre-production, which is prepping for the shoot. You have development first, the script, and like getting the script down. Then you have to find the money, and then it's pre-production. Then you're in production, and then it's post. And like the whole adrenaline rush of pre-production and production like peaks, and then you wrap, and you're like, it's a big sigh of relief. And then like, okay, now you have post. And like, I had a very good experience with our editor, Chris Bradley, because he was like, sometimes you have to take a little bit of time to jump back into it. So he was so efficient in the fact that he did everything. Like, we didn't have an assistant editor. He did everything. So he was able to organize it, get an assembly done. And it just alleviated a lot of pressure, because I was like, okay, I can like digest the experience, watch all the dailies, watch all the footage, and like re-enter into this new phase of production, which post-production is a completely different pace. You're like by yourself a lot of the time watching stuff and trying to figure stuff out. Chris is a really independent editor, so such a blessing that, you know, it's like I can be very hands-off with a lot of it and then dive in with the cuts and like the takes and what you want to use. But it's just such a different pace. And I have to say, I don't love it as much as production. It's like, I love working with the crew. I love working with the actors. Like, you get such a thrill from the interaction, the collaboration with them, and you're just all together doing it. And, you know, post-production, when you're editing your film, it's like the final rewrite of the script. It's like things change. Like, you have all the revisions you made with the script, and then when you're shooting it, all the little tweaks that you make. But then when you're in post, you actually, it's like the moment of truth, like what will work and what will not. And, you know, if you have a real problem, there has to be a solution. There has to be a way to figure it out, you know, so you can get the story told in the most effective way.
And you've mentioned a few of your team members and the collaborative efforts. How important is it to put together your team? And does that happen early in the process? And does that take a long time to make sure that you are working with the people who see your vision and are going to play nice in the sandbox and work collaboratively?
Yeah, it's so important. Oh my gosh, that's so important. And like, I have to take a moment, like, it's not always like that. Like, you don't always have that. And with this film, I had that. And that's why, to me, the stars aligned, because I had this executive producer and writer, Ron Youngle, who wrote the script. And he was just such a supportive, like, he was such an amazing writer to work with on this, because he was able to change things as he saw it wasn't working with certain scenes. And like, that was a gift. It really was. And then, you know, to me, the most important relationship is the relationship with the director and the cinematographer. And Evan just knocked it out of the ballpark. I mean, yeah, you're directing, you set up your shot, you set up your frame, but it was like he could find like the perfect angle for something where it's like you get so much more of the emotional power of the performance from it, or he has an instinct with it that is just so beautiful. And I feel so privileged to know him and work with him. And I feel like that is a really important relationship. And really, like, that crew we had, the local crew we had in Arizona, was amazing. They were like climbing the mountains with the gear, you know, it was like, it was so hardcore. They were like, they stuck to it, and they were really, really, really committed because they saw what's happening on camera, and with the actors, it was magical.
Yeah. Well, honestly, it's perfectly into, so you have to have the right team, hopefully have those great collaborative partners and people who are all in. But then
and I want to say something about that. It's okay to wait for that and to say no to the ones that don't work out. Like I would say like my mistakes have been saying no to the collaborations that I knew were off, even though I've learned so much from that. I've learned so much from what we would call mistakes or being not aligned with the right collaborators. But I think I'm so like, I'm never going to give up. Like, I'm so committed, but it's okay to like walk away from things that start to feel toxic. I think that's good. I think you have to listen to your inner guidance system on that. And with this one, it was like, I felt very supported by the team. And so it was like what felt impossible was doable because we had each other to get it done. It was like,
I love that. Yeah. And you also had some other partners that helped with pieces of the film, right? So you were the first film to get the tax credit in the state of Arizona. Is that correct?
You're the first feature film to qualify for the Arizona tax and the tax credit. And so there was the Arizona Film Board and Film Tucson were really supportive and helped us get going, like answering our questions, like helping us with our location scout, where we can shoot, because there's so much epic landscape. I mean, we were shooting on the most old, epic, beautiful landscapes, and they look so different from one to the next. Well, so you have like one that looks like Mezcal Studios that, saw the likes of Howard Hawks and Clint Eastwood and Tombstone. It's all like prairie and like prairie as far as you can see. And then like you're at 4Y, which is like old Chiricahua land where they stood up against the army for 10 years. And you're in these like rocky, mountainous, they look like sculptures. It's just beautiful and very different. So you have all those varying terrains, all the different looks, and we brought it together in the film.
And then you also, I don't know if you want to tease a little bit or share a little bit about the film, little synopsis here, because I think there's some other partnerships and people that you brought in to make sure that you were making sure that you were living in authenticity with the language you used and with the traditions that you wove in.
Yes. So a brief synopsis is there's two soldiers from opposing sides of the Civil War. They must unite to survive the Arizona desert. And it's based on a true historical battle that took place at Picacho Peak. And we shot where the battle took place in the same area, Picacho Peak, where the battle took place in the same month where it took place in April. We wanted the desert terrain and the blooms to match when the actual battle happened. And in our story, there's an Apache character, and we wanted to cast of course, Native American and as close to the Apache character as possible. And we cast Wayne Charles Baker, who's Squamish on the east coast of Canada. And so we brought in an Apache consultant to help with the language and the storyline of what would have been accurate to that character. So it was like one of the examples I'll give it. It's like a learning process. I did a lot of work to find someone to help us with this. And Larold, he was amazing. And he helped us through the whole process. And he explained to us that the original name that we had for the character was Great Hawk. He's like, that's not what an Apache name would have been. So then he asked our writer, so explain to me about this character. Like, what's his trajectory? What's his journey? And the writer, we had all this conversation on Zoom, and he was like, oh, I see. So like the actual name for someone with great vision would be like Great Seer. And so he gave us that in Apache, and it was the correct name. And then he guided the whole character development in terms of the way that he navigated the two other characters and what would have been realistic and what was like true to the Apache culture in that area. So that was really helpful. And I wanted to do that right. I wanted to get that right. I didn't want it to be this version that we thought was the Apache version for this character based on our own research. We wanted to bring in a real Apache consultant to help navigate that to make sure it was correct and authentic. And the same goes for we have a scene with a Navajo tribe of warriors, and our boom op, Luke Hunt, he's Navajo. And he explained to me, he came on as our Navajo consultant as well. And he explained to me what their ceremony would have been for this certain scene. I'm not going to give it away because it's very important to the story. And so, but he guided us through that. He helped us find our Navajo actors, and then also worked with our costume designer and wardrobe to make sure it was accurate. And again, it's in the Navajo language. So we wanted to make sure that we were doing it right and we weren't expressing or showing any kind of stereotypes of what we think it is based on our own research, but bringing in the people from that land who know and making them part of the process. And I thought that was an important part of it.
100%. And it's so respectful that you're intentional about it, right? And it seems like that's a word that also is part of your narrative, the kind of projects that you have worked on, the kind of things that you want to do. But I want to change the topic a little bit because you're also a mom and a wife. And I know it can be difficult. It's not just for women. It's also difficult for men in the workforce or who might be in entertainment to navigate how we go through life and how we balance our careers with our families. Were you on location for a while? Did somebody pick up slack? Or what did that look like?
When they say it takes a tribe or it takes a community, it's so true. Like my sister helps me I have a 6-year-old son. His name is Levi. And being a mom in this industry is really hard. I will say it's really hard. It's like you have a crazy schedule and always need to be on or available. And I've learned from just being a mom that I need to have more boundaries around that, around my time and around my energy, because to me, he's the most important. And I didn't know if I wanted to be a mom or not. It's like I had a lot of ambivalence and resistance to it. And then when we welcomed him into the world, it was like, oh my gosh, it just completely changed me. So it's been a beautiful experience. I love him very much. You open up to this next layer of love that you didn't know was possible. And again, I felt everything reprioritizing in my mind and in my life from having him. And I'm very happy that he was born, It's hard because sometimes you feel like you have to pick between your child and your career, or being a mom and your career, especially in this industry. It's like one of the most notoriously challenging industries for women, especially as a director. And for a long time, I struggled with that. And I was like, no, there's other women around me doing it. I see examples of it. It can be done. So I was gone for 6 weeks doing prep and locations. And my husband works crazy hours too. He works in the construction business and it's insane hours. So it was really relying a lot on my parents. So it was my dad and my mom helped me out the entire time. And then Levi came the last week we were on set so he could see it and experience. He's in the flashbacks a little bit, but I wanted him to be exposed to that and to see that and see the work that I was doing. And I think it's it's hard to navigate and you need help.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It's really hard. And I'm tired a lot. But you need help. You need to ask for help. You can't do it all by yourself. I don't think we were meant to. And
right.
I think our society there's the subtext that, as a mom, you should be able to do it all. And that, you work full time. It's just not possible. You need help. So my parents have stepped in quite a bit to help me through this. And when I was working on the documentaries with Brave New Films, my parents have helped me a lot. My sister helps me a lot. She's like his second mom, because for a long time, David was still in New York when I was working here in LA. So that, it's just my journey. Everyone's journey is unique and different, but I would just encourage women that it's okay to ask for help and that we all need it.
Couldn't have said it better. I feel that every day. Luckily my daughter's a little older, so she now will say, what meetings do you have today? What do you have going on? Is it something interesting that she wants to get involved in? But I love the fact that it's important for us to be honest and to show our kids also what is taking our time and attention away from them, but how it's going to add value in their lives. And how let's show up as we are mom, but we're also our own people who have these other things going on that make us better moms and make us stronger.
Yeah, that's a good point. Because I'll watch the cuts with Levi wants to watch the cuts. So he'll sit there and he'll explain to me why one of the scenes works better. Or but for him to see okay, this is what we did when we were there in Arizona and why I was away. And then what you got to see and then putting the pieces together and seeing what it is now. I think it's good for him to see that. It's kind of coming full circle with why I wasn't here and what kind of work I was doing. And you just said it so well. It's you have your own work and it brings a lot of value.
So your first feature-length film as a director is in process. What is next for Deborah?
So I'll tell you what my goal and my dream is that the war between does the festival circuit, we get acquired, my wish list, and then we get financed for the next feature film, which Ron, who's the writer and the EP of The War Between, has already written. It's a beautiful story, but it's a bigger budget film. It's a World War II story, not a Civil War story. They're both period pieces. But so it would be my goal, and what we're working towards next is finishing the development of Fall. It's called Fall. And then getting it financed so we can go into production with that film. That is what I would love to do next. And I'm always, like you said before, I intentionally choose my projects. I'm very intentional about what I work on. And I don't always have the luxury to do that. But as best I can, I pick projects that I feel are adding something to our society. So it's not just, I want to work on something because I believe that the power of film and the power of storytelling can change hearts and minds. It's like something that can help steer culture and change society. And I think that what we work on is really important. What I work on, I need to feel in alignment with it, like it's doing something good. So I'm always working on, I always have ideas, and I always love working on documentaries, documentary films, documentary television, about real people. I don't know how to put it into words really, but it's just like social justice documentary and stories about people who are making a difference or have made a difference, highlighting those kinds of hopeful stories. I feel like my heart is always there too. So it's like, to me, documentaries will always be like, I will always be working on documentaries and directing films. Like it's a two-pronged approach. Like, I want to be doing it all with that.
And you can. I think you can. Yeah. I think that you're at that precipice in the beginning of directing many, many more things. So I'm going to put that into the universe for you as well.
Thank you.
First, so Deborah, what is the easiest place for people to follow your journey, learn more about the film so that they can see when it's going to come out and support it and support you?
Yes. So we're right now, I just started Instagram and I have my own Instagram. It's Deb_directs, but we're about to like roll out with the social media for the film. So The War Between Film will be the Instagram, and the website's coming out too. And the best way to stay in touch is through those channels. I'm going to be releasing more about the film through the Instagram and the website very soon. So it's thewarbetweenfilm.com. And that's also the Instagram handle. And that's the best way to follow the film now. And hopefully we'll be in a festival near you soon.
Awesome. And do you have a favorite quote, mantra, family motto, words of wisdom?
I have a lot of them. I think the one that sticks with me the most, because it's what shifted things for me, was comparison is the thief of joy. And that was Teddy Roosevelt said that. Comparison is the thief of joy. And as I've lived my life, I have learned that your happiness and your joy and your enjoyment of your life is your power. It's your power. Like when that gets taken away and you're not happy or you feel that's when you start to feel depleted. And so I feel like keeping yourself grounded and excited about the next thing and proud of what you've accomplished is a powerful way to move forward in your life. So I feel like that quote has stuck with me probably the most. Yeah. I have more though, Annika, but I have to I have to go through them, but that's like the one I can think of, like the top big game changer for me.
Yeah, that's a really good one. And it's one that I don't think now, like, I need to add that to my list of quotes that I like to look at. Well, thank you so much for introducing yourself, talking about your journey, all the things that you learned along the way, how you figured out what you're passionate about, and how you've been intentional about pursuing that passion through your whole life. We talked a little bit about relationships and how important that is, collaborations, making sure that you're surrounded by the right people to fulfill a shared vision, and making sure that you're living in authenticity with those partnerships, and that it's not just your concept, but that it is the true concept, or particularly when you're trying to make sure that you're honoring people's traditions, whether it's in film or in other projects. So Deb, thank you so much for being here. We'll have the socials and the website and the show notes for all of the listeners and viewers. And to the audience, thank you for being here. I'll be back again in a few days with another amazing story to share.
Want more? Check out amplifywithannika.com or follow me on socials at amplifywithannika.